Karen Hartglass. You're listening to It's All About Food. Thanks for joining me today on this lovely day in May. Tra-la, it's May. What season is it in May? It's supposed to be spring, and we've had just about everything except snow here in New York the last few weeks. Lots of rain, cold, and then really hot, and now it's just the way I like it. So I'm grateful for that. I wanted to take a moment, I do this occasionally on the program, to just express some things that I'm grateful for. And this is an exercise that is good for everyone. There's so much science behind the benefit of gratitude and expressing gratitude. So let's do that, okay? I'm grateful for this great weather today. I'm also grateful for my terrace, and I'm realizing how much I love it because I haven't been able to use it for over 2 months. Thanks to a local law here in New York City, I mentioned it, I think, last week, that there's been a lot of work on the exterior of our buildings in order to prevent things falling from above on the people below. It's a nice concept in theory. It's a disaster in practice. And even though all my windows have been closed during this work, all this dust came into my bedroom. I did major spring cleaning in here the other day. And I hope there's nothing in that dust that will cause any damage to any of the residents. But it made me realize how much I miss going out on my terrace. So I have to take extra effort and go downstairs and outside if I want to get some real air. So I'm grateful for those things. The other thing I'm grateful for is my life partner, Gary DiMattei, who has been gone in California for over 5 months. He came back for a quick 3-week trip in April, but he just came home this morning. And he has been in San Jose, California, first taking care of his 92-year-old dad who had fallen and was in the hospital and then rehab and then came home, and then he passed in February. And Gary's been taking a lot of time now getting the house ready to sell and deciding what treasures in the house should stay and what should go. And we just received 34 boxes of his mom's treasures, which is going to be a whole series of episodes on managing that. But it's part of the theme of today's program, which is aging. And I want to talk a little bit about aging. I'll do that later in the program and all of how it affects us. And we're going to talk about something maybe you haven't thought about because it's a rather unusual topic and an ingenious topic. And that is what I'm going to be talking about with my guest today, Isa Leshko, the author and photographer of a gorgeous new book called Allowed to Grow Old: Portraits of Elderly Animals from Farm Sanctuaries. Isa Leshko is a photographer who focuses on themes of aging and animal rights. Her images of aging farm animals are much admired and have been published in The Atlantic, Boston Globe, the Guardian Harper's, the New York Times, and elsewhere. Hello, Isa.
Hello. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And as soon as the publicist or marketing director from the University of Chicago Press reached out about your book, and if I was interested in talking to you, I just read the brief description and I want that book and I want to talk to you.
Thank you.
I was very excited to get it and read it, and now I'm excited to talk to you. So thank you. Let's talk about first a little bit about you. Mm-hmm. Why you became a photographer.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, it was kind of I guess it was a delayed quarter life crisis since it hit at around age 30. I had been working crazy long hours in the tech sector throughout my 20s. I was also doing some freelance writing during that time as well. And my whole life was focused on work. And I took a photography class at a local museum school, the De Cordova Museum. By local, I mean local to Salem, Massachusetts, where I live. And If that class had just been about f-stops and shutter speeds, I think I would have been, found it interesting, but it probably would not have engaged me, at least long term. But the teacher spent a portion of each class on the history of photography, and that was my first exposure to photography as an art form. And it completely opened my eyes to a whole other medium and way of expressing myself. And I was hooked. I then took some darkroom classes, and it's kind of cliche, but the first time I saw the image appear in the tray, on the print in the tray of developer, I was hooked. It's been my passion, and then my full-time focus for at least 15 years now.
I'm a believer in the arts. I think arts are very important to humanity and our existence and our survival, and for helping others understand situations and empathize. It's important on so many levels. It's interesting in today's world where so many people, thanks to technology, are so many things, and many people probably think they're a photographer with their iPhone. And it's not the same.
Although there are some very talented photographers who use their iPhone. In fact, photojournalists, sometimes those in combat situations, will use their iPhone because it's the lightest, easiest camera. So you can't just write off the iPhone, but point taken.
Yes, but it does take skill even with an iPhone to know an angle, the timing, the lighting. And there's a lot of tricks with the iPhone that most of us don't even know are there on how to use it as a camera.
True.
Okay, enough about the iPhone. But photographs are so important on so many levels. We'll get back to that. Before we get into the book, I want to continue talking a little bit about you. And you mentioned early in the book in the description about taking pictures of people and how people often don't like photographs of themselves and they don't look like us. And I know I'm a singer and a performer and I get headshots all the time and they're supposed to look like us. I mean, that's the point of them so that the director can recognize you when flipping through thousands of photos after hearing you in an audition. But oftentimes we do all kinds of things with makeup and lighting so that we look maybe better than we look. But you were mentioning that snapshot isn't the way most people see themselves. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I'm not entirely familiar with that section. Okay. I did talk about power dynamics in photography.
Yes.
And I'm so much more comfortable, I guess I'm so much more comfortable behind the camera than in front of it. So I definitely am sympathetic to the fact that being in front of the camera for humans in particular is a very vulnerable experience. And when you think about it, the photographer pretty much has control over the whole situation. She controls what's in the frame, controls when to click the shutter, and even after the photograph has been taken, the photographer controls what image is shared, either electronically or in print form. And so the subject frequently is lacking that empowerment. And that was something that I found very uncomfortable and was one of the reasons why I did not photograph my mom when she was in her final years struggling with Alzheimer's disease. I had a lot of ethical problems with the fact that she couldn't provide consent. And also, my mom was a pretty self-conscious about her image, and she would not want people seeing her in such a vulnerable state. So that was part of my concern around something that I've always thought about when photographing people. And some of my favorite portrait photographers take that into consideration, that power and balance. There's a photographer, Shelby Lee Adams, who has spent his career documenting the people of Appalachia, and he treats his subjects as collaborators. He takes Polaroids when he is setting up an image, and he shows them to his subjects to get their feedback. And I mentioned him in the introduction as a shining example of a person or a photographer who addresses those power imbalances in a very sensitive way. And since I photograph animals, I obviously can't do that or take his approach. But it was important to me that I meet the animals on their terms, and that I didn't photograph them, for example, in a studio setting with studio lights. It was important to me that I photograph them at their sanctuaries, where and let them drive the process. So in other words, if an animal felt or conveyed that they were uncomfortable with being photographed, I immediately backed off and took that cue. So I couldn't get consent per se from an animal that I was photographing, but it was really important to me that I took every step possible to make that animal feel comfortable and at ease by my presence.
I'm having this crazy image as you're talking about getting consent from animals, which obviously is not possible, but I don't know how many people have been photographed by a journalist or someone who comes up with a piece of paper and says, can you sign this so we have use, we can use your photo? And I'm imagining sticking the animal's paw in the mud and on the paper.
Right. Yeah, well, my cats are very used to being photographed by me. It's one of the downsides of living with a photographer. And they are very good at communicating when they do not wish to be photographed.
Cats are posers.
Great posers. Yes. But then they will also flick their tail and swat at the iPhone, which I typically use to photograph them, and say they've had enough. And where are my greenies?
I just had one last question about you, and before we jump more into the book, were you happy with your headshot by Ron Cowie in your book?
Ron Cowie. So Ron was one of my...
What a great name, Cowie.
Yeah, Cowie, yes. Shout out to Ron. He was one of my early photography teachers, and he wasn't the first teacher I had, but he was definitely very influential, and it was really special for him to be a part of the book. When the prospect of being photographed just did not make me very comfortable. So I knew that I would be in really good hands with someone that I laugh often with, and who is such a skilled portrait photographer. That said, it's always uncomfortable to see yourself or to hear yourself speak. So, but Ron was really very sensitive, and we had a great afternoon. And yeah, overall, I'm happy with the photograph.
Good. I like it. I haven't seen any others of you other than I did watch the video on your website, isaleshko.com, where you did a little trailer or a short film about photographing animals.
Yeah, that was a collaboration, a very joyful collaboration with a husband and wife filmmaking team. They go by Wally Films, and it's Mark and Angela Wally. And they're also actually fellow vegans. And early in the project, when I began photographing elderly animals, I wanted to try to generate support for the work. And I thought that producing a film would be a way to create an audience for the work. And working with the Wallies was wonderful, and they're so talented. The Mark even did the soundtrack to that film. It's really beautiful. But it was taken fairly early in the project, so while it does show some of my methodology for photographing these animals, and what led me to photograph old animals in particular, the project has evolved quite a bit since then, and I talk about that evolution in the introduction of my book.
Okay, now the book. So
okay.
The book is about, well, it's Allowed to Grow Old, Portraits of Elderly Animals from Farm Sanctuaries. And my listeners know what farm sanctuaries are. There's the first one, Farm Sanctuary, and then there are many other farm sanctuaries, Woodstock and Catskill Animal and many, many others. And this is where a lucky few, a bunch of animals who have been through some horrific situations, either by escaping factory farms and saving their lives, or some that have been in some abusive situations by hoarders, and sometimes by people who just couldn't care for the animals anymore, and they're lucky enough to end up in sanctuaries. People who have companion animals often can see their dogs grow old, their cats grow old, but we don't see aging cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys. We don't talk about them because most of them don't live very long lives. They end up on our plates.
Right.
And this is so important. Somebody must have said this to you, but I think of it like the Holocaust survivors whose stories are so poignant and compelling because they were the few that survived when others weren't. And the situation is different in some respects, factory farms versus genocide. It's a different kind of humane disaster. But this is really a lovely thing and an important thing. So let's just talk more about the aging animals that you met for this piece.
Yeah, I have to say, so many of them did survive horrific trauma early in their lives. And as you said, the sanctuaries are often focused on rehabilitating these animals when they first arrive to these sanctuaries. Many of them are very ill, near death, and they provide incredibly sophisticated medical care and round-the-clock attention until they're back on their feet or hooves, and then they're given a place to live freely and engage in their natural behaviors. And it really is remarkable to be at a farm sanctuary. In my book, there is a list, and also on my website, actually, there's a list of the sanctuaries that I visited, and most of them do offer tours. So I highly recommend trying to visit one of these sanctuaries and support them. At Pasado Safe Haven Sanctuary in Solton, Washington, there's a welcome sign that reads, "Sweet creatures who pass this way, once scared and alone. Now you are safe. Now you are home." And I just cried the first time I saw that sign. And, it's remarkable to be in the presence of a farm animal who has actually managed to reach old age, because, as you had said, so many of them are slaughtered before they're 6 months of age. So to photograph these animals, be in the presence of these animals, and to photograph them was really remarkable. One of the things that struck me was just how, even though these animals had endured such cruelty, so many of these animals endured such cruelty and neglect, they managed to still find comfort and joy even in their lives, to savor the basic pleasures of dust baths and the warm sun, the companionship of a fellow friend. And they also, many of them, form close bonds with the humans who care for them. And the fact that they are able to open their hearts to that after suffering abuse at the hands of humans is just really remarkable.
A question just popped into my head that I hadn't thought about before. Some would say that non-human animals don't have any concept of past and future or memory, and they just live in the present. And maybe that's why they come to this sanctuary and they have relationships and they're living a nice life. But they have memory, don't they?
I would definitely say so, and I think that there have been studies on memory in different farm animal species, but I can tell you, at least from the animals that I have met, there is definitely they do remember. There are still signs of PTSD, if you will, with some of the animals. I've also seen animals grieve the loss of companions, and pigs in particular grieve very deeply, and they will sometimes just shut down and isolate themselves. And there have been instances of pigs who have died literally of broken hearts because they just can't recover from the loss of a companion. So yes, I would definitely say that even though animals have a remarkable ability to live in the present, they do have memories of their past and their relationships in their past.
And if you're listening to the gentle tune in the background, that means spring is here. It's the Mr. Softy truck, which always seems to come around this time of year at around 4:30, the middle of this program.
I want an Italian ice now.
It's like the first time I've heard it this season, so I don't know if that's a good thing, but I look forward to the day when they serve vegan soft serve, which is so easy to do.
Yes, yes.
Now, when a human baby is born, whoever they are, that it's the eye contact between the baby and the mother. That's the first thing and very important. And we communicate so much through our eyes, and the stories are there in our eyes. They're so expressive. And the same thing is true of these animals that you have photographed. Each one of them, the expression in their eye is so profound.
Yeah, that it was important to me that I photograph the animals as portraits and to photograph them at eye level. I wanted viewers of these images to be able to look these animals in the eye directly and to have an intimate moment with them. It was really important to me also that I illustrate the sentience of these animals. For an image to make it into the book, it had to be more than just a beautiful picture of a pig or a chicken or turkey. It had to be a portrait of Violet, for example, or Ash. It had to reveal something unique about that animal. And so when I was editing my film, I was also looking very closely at the expressions, the facial expressions of the animals. I chose images that conveyed their emotions, and the eye, what was being conveyed in the eyes of my subjects was really important. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that you connected with and responded to.
Absolutely. It's the first thing we look at, and you just see so much depth. You know that these what do I want to call them? I mean, I could call them animals. I want to give them a better word. These beings, they've lived lives, and it's in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you succeeded.
And there's a range of personalities, just like with human animals, we human animals. Some of the farmed animals that I met are shy. Some are very outgoing. Some had quite a bit of sass. My portrait of Bessie, Holstein, who was rescued from the dairy industry, she's given me a little side eye. She's given me, if she had a brow, it would be arched. So I think it's important, and it's interesting actually, if you look at the different, for example, cow image portraits, there is quite a range of expressions that you can see. It's I really appreciated that aspect of the project and getting to know these animals and to recognize that they are unique individuals.
We're used to seeing storybooks and films, cartoons, where the characters are animals that are given human characteristics and they talk and they play out the stories. But I can see people in these animals' faces.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's I'm done. Just people in their faces. I see thinking beings with expressive faces.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, it's funny that anthropomorphism is considered is frequently
That word.
criticized.
Yes.
you know um, and if you define anthropomorphism as attributing emotions to non-human animals, then I unabashedly embrace anthropomorphism. I mean, it's kind of arrogant to assume that humans are the only beings on the planet who are capable of emotions.
In all of our experience, we respond to things based on our own lives, our own experience, our own vision, what we see, and that's how we respond to things. And we do that with each other. Why can't we do it with animals too?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that some of it is this cultural. It's left over from the impact that animal behaviorists had on our culture. Darwin, interestingly enough, will actually embrace the idea that animals have emotions, and he even photographed facial expressions of both humans and non-human animals and documented them in one of his books, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. It wasn't until the animal behaviorists came along in the early 1900s, and they had a chip on their shoulders. They wanted to prove themselves as a legitimate science. And so they said, oh no, animal behavior is just the result of these hardwired reflexes or associations that are learned between positive or negative stimuli and actions. And, what's happened in the last 3 decades is that this theory has been challenged by various scientific fields. And what's clear is, just as we've inherited a heart or a skeletal system, our brains are also inherited from our animal ancestors, and that human emotions are animal emotions and animal emotions are human emotions. So I think that it actually is much more sentimental to attribute or to think that animals don't feel emotions or don't feel pain, because it's allows us to treat them poorly. If we think that they're incapable of feeling, then we're cleared of any guilt of the pain or of the harm that we're inflicting upon them.
Those early animal behaviorists did a lot of damage and really set us backwards quite a bit.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. So this work had an important change on you, and you became vegan.
Yes.
After getting to know one of these animals.
That is true. I had been a vegetarian all of my adult life, but I had thought that I really was making ethical choices in my diet. I only purchased dairy products that came from quote unquote organic, humane dairy farms. But I never thought about what happens to cows who, after they are spent, after they no longer produce milk. I didn't think about what happened to male calves in the dairy industry. And then I met Valentino, and he was a dairy industry survivor. And he was very frail and sick when he arrived at Farm Sanctuary's shelter in Orland, California. that sanctuary or shelter no longer is now closed, but I had visited it several times for my project before that location closed. And he was very frail. He had lax tendons. He needed round-the-clock care and physical therapy. And with a lot of love and patience, he made a full recovery. And he became a 2,500-pound gentle giant, which is when I met him. He was 19 years old. When I met him, he was the longest living Holstein at that time that Farm Sanctuary had ever cared for. And I spent an afternoon photographing him, and I couldn't help but wonder how many Valentinos passed away, or were killed, I should say. Let's not sugarcoat it. Were killed because I had liked milk in my coffee or butter in my mashed potatoes. And then when I was done photographing Valentino, I spent time petting him. I always like to spend time after photographing an animal, kind of conveying my thanks to them. And he licked me. And his tongue was sandpapery. It was just like my cat's tongues. I don't know if you've ever been licked by a cat, but they have real rough tongues. And Valentino's tongue was just like that, only much bigger. So it was like getting a microdermabrasion on my cheek. But when I made that connection in my mind between my cats and Valentino, at that point I knew I couldn't consume dairy products any longer. And so yeah, my time with Valentino definitely changed me profoundly.
The phrase you used, dairy industry survivor, gave me chills when I first read it.
Oh wow, yeah.
It's an expression that I haven't heard before, and it just resonated with me. What a powerful way to explain what is going on in a few words. Like we talk about cancer survivors, whatever, but a dairy industry survivor, powerful.
Yeah, I mean, these animals, most of the animals I met were survivors. They came from horrific circumstances. And not only did they live through it, but they managed to defy all odds and reach old age. So they're survivors. And so I do think of my images as testaments to their strength and their will to survive.
Well, I think this book can help change the world.
Thank you.
And at the very least, it's a wonderful conversation starter. So I think everyone should have this on their coffee table.
Thank you.
And share it, and perhaps read some of the brief descriptions about some of these animals, look them in the eye, and then start having a conversation about what's really going on.
Yeah, my hope is that vegans will love my book, but I really don't want to just preach to the choir with the book. So my hope is that it will be seen by as diverse of an audience as possible, because I want my hope.
You want to change the world.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. It sounds a little arrogant to say, but yes, I do want to change the world. So,
I mean, I would like to think we are all here to make the world better, each in our own way. Unfortunately, I don't know that everyone agrees with me, but don't we want to leave it better than we came into it as I do.
I hope so. Yes,
Yeah.
that is the hope. And we all could use a lot more empathy toward other living beings right now, given the climate in this country and around the world. My images hopefully will also show the power of empathy.
The last thing is the dignity. So we don't treat our elder humans very well in our society. At least many of us don't. And even, it was funny, you opened the program and you were talking about your quarter life crisis or whatever.
Yes.
30, which I like because that means you're going to live till 120.
We should hope. I should hope.
But I like that. Even 40, 50, 60, society is very ageist and starts to look down on us as we age. And this is really unfortunate because we're all participating members of society and we should all be treated with dignity and respect. And we all have wonderful things to offer and make this world a better place. Mm-hmm. So photographing animals in the aging process, perhaps, I don't know, will help us look at ourselves as well in a different, more dignified light.
I hope so. And respecting the dignity of the animals I photographed was extremely important. When I was looking at or editing images for the book, it was really important to me that the images were respectful. Even though the animals that I photographed had no conception of what photography was or would never see the images, treating them with respect was important because it also hopefully educates or inspires others to look and treat these animals with respect. And what was interesting is, I debated, one of the things I debated was whether to include drool in my photographs. As you can imagine, older animals are missing teeth and many of them drool. And I went back and forth on this and I realized that by potentially removing that, the drool from the photographs, I was imposing an anthropocentric framework on these animals. And I thought it was important to, yes, respect who they were, but part of that also meant respecting the fact that they were animals and not humans in feathers or fur, and respecting who they were as non-human animals.
And it's okay to drool.
Yes, and it's okay to drool.
It's okay to drool. Yes. If you need to drool on.
Yes.
Oh, we are such a judgmental group.
Yep.
Anyway, Isa, it was delightful talking with you today and wonderful reading the book. I'm going to be looking at these images many, many times. They're inspiring.
Thank you so much.
I thank you for putting all the time and effort and really getting your hands dirty sometimes to make these photographs.
Yeah, one of the jokes that I often have shared is the fact that, well, it's true. I was often covered in animal scat by the end of a day photographing animals at these farm sanctuaries because I was often lying right on the ground, right in animal scat. So I would travel with garbage bags in my luggage because I didn't want my luggage to get dirty. So yeah, I definitely got quite dirty in the making of the work. But anyway, thank you so much for having me here and for engaging so deeply with these images and for sharing my work with your listeners.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for joining me today, Isa Leshko, author and photographer of Allowed to Grow Old, Portraits of Elderly Animals from Farm Sanctuaries. Be well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, just a few minutes left. What shall we talk about? I wanted to continue the subject of aging, and maybe I'll relate it to food somehow. We're surrounded by all of us aging, and it becomes more profound as we get very old. And I have my mom, for example, who has dementia. And it was interesting thinking about photographs because photographs are so important to her, for example. She spends a lot of time going through photo albums when I have to say I'm very proud of her. She's 85 and a half years old, and she uses Facebook and email. And when she sees photographs that she really likes on Facebook, she wants to print them. And she just wants to have these photos. Perhaps it helps this feeling of memory by seeing the photos. It's really difficult to say, but images are so important to us. So I mentioned that my partner Gary DeMattei came home this morning and from San Jose, from being away for 5 months, and he was helping clear out his parents' home that he had lived in growing up. They had lived in this home for, I think, over 65 years. A lot of stuff, a lot of memories, and it was time to sell the house and move the stuff out. And the question came, what to save, what to keep, what to send to New York. And we now have 34 boxes. And many of the items in these boxes are related to food, dishware, housewares. And I'm excited to experience them. And it's interesting to me, stuff. I'm not someone who likes to collect stuff. On the other hand, things of beauty, things that have been treasured, things that are meaningful, things that can be used. I'm a strong supporter of if you want to have it, use it. And so we are going to start a whole new life with all of these new old things. And I'm excited about it. And I hope that you will see some of it, at least in my daily blog, What Vegans Eat. I'm not quite sure when I'll start bringing out some of these treasures and photographing my food on them. But we will definitely be doing a cookbook with much of the treasures from Gary's mom. So that's something very exciting that I'm really looking forward to. But as we age, do we want to hold on to things or do we want to let go? And I'm kind of in this period now. How do I prepare for the next quarter of my life or the next half of my life, depending on how long I'm going to live? And stuff is a big part of it. Do I want a lot of stuff? Do I want a little stuff? Like I said, I definitely want to make sure that I use everything and not have stuff in storage. That just doesn't make sense to me. So we just have a few minutes left. I wanted to talk about soy milk, specifically making soy milk. Has anybody made soy milk? So one of the things that I'm trying to do and improve on more and more is to have less waste. There are some people, amazingly, who live a zero waste life. I don't know how that's possible, but I can try to do better. And we buy soy milk in those bricks, those plastic bricks. And it's been bothering me for a very long time. And then there's only two brands that I found that make the soy milk that I like to drink, which consists of just organic soybeans and water. That's it, 2 ingredients. Trader Joe's and West Soy. West Soy can be found in many stores, and sometimes it's outrageously expensive. Sometimes it's a better price, and Trader Joe's is always less expensive. Does that mean one is better than the other? I don't know. I buy them both. And Trader Joe's for a while didn't have this soy milk. I thought there was like a conspiracy or something, but the shelves were clean of their simple organic soy milk. It's in a light green and light yellow container, if you know what I'm talking about, typically $1.79. And I was informed that there had been a problem with the factory, and then they started making it again. But this made me think about making soy milk. And some time ago, I knew some people who had soy milk machines. Do you have one? Do you make soy milk? So I started looking into soy milk machines, and I thought, do I really need more stuff? I've got 34 boxes that are coming. Do I want to buy another appliance? And I was reading about the soy milk makers, and I realized what the soy milk makers do, I could do without a machine. So I thought I would get my toe wet. I would start the process by making some simple soy milk at home, and then maybe sometime in the future, maybe I would decide, I need the machine or not. So I started reading about making soy milk, and there's many blogs and recipes online, and I thought I would go to a trusted source, which is a cookbook called The Book of Tofu. And it came out, I don't know, gosh, I should have brought it in front of me, but I didn't. The 70s, maybe? I remember getting it, and I never made anything in this book, but I treasured it because it looked like so much love and care went into the descriptions, the stories. This was by a husband and wife team. The wife, I believe, was Japanese, and the husband American, perhaps. And there were beautiful little hand line drawings of how to make things. I just loved it. It was like a work of art, very unlike cookbooks you see today. So many cookbooks just come out really cheaply made, poorly edited. Some of them don't have nice photos. They're just, the whole publishing industry has changed quite a bit, and the quality, unfortunately, has gone down quite a bit. And maybe people self-publish, and that could be a good or bad thing. But I just found that this particular cookbook, The Book of Tofu, I just loved it for its detail and its picture. So I thought, I'm going to make my first batch of soy milk from their recipe. And I went about it, and I have to tell you, I was kind of disappointed. Because the soy milk, which you have to soak the soybeans overnight for 10 hours, 12 hours, rinse them, drain them, and then blend them, and I have a Vitamix, so that was easy, and then cook them, and then you can filter it, and then you cook it again, and then you should have a nice soy milk. Does that sound like a lot of trouble to you? I should go back and just get the milk in the brick. No, I don't want the plastic. Well, I did this, and the soy milk ended up very, very thick. So then I went to all of the recipes and people's comments that were online, and the recipes offered were pretty much the same ratios of stuff, and many people were saying that the milk was too thick. So I was a little disappointed that this book that I considered a Bible, and I followed it exactly in the instructions, didn't really come out the way I wanted it to. I have since read up a lot more, and I'm going to continue until I make the perfect soy milk. So I hope you stay tuned for that. And I'm going to try and make it as easy as I can and eliminate some steps. But if you have some suggestions, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me at info@realmeals.org. Let's have a conversation about making soy milk. And then from there, we can make tofu and all the other wonderful things that are from organic soybeans, because I like soy. Shall we do that? And what else? We have just like seconds left, don't we? So I have like 6 topics here, and I don't have time to to jump into any of them, so I'll have to bring them up another time. I invite you to visit responsibleeatingandliving.com. That's where I live. Read my blog, What Vegans Eat. Please share it. And if you have a chance, if you like this program, recommend it to others. Share it. You can rate it wherever you listen to your podcasting. We could really use that to help share this information. I'm going to express my gratitude for you, my listeners, for listening to this program. And now I'm going to tell you to have a delicious week. Okay? Thanks for listening. I'm Karen Hartglass. You've been listening to It's All About Food. Bye-bye.